What do you think is the actual objective of the West in preparing for a frozen conflict?
Before I answer your question, Danny, let me just say that it's very interesting, but I think it's true for both of us. We're both Americans, both served in the American military. You, of course, much longer than me. And we're in a situation where we listen to the Russians, who the United States is basically fighting a war against. And we think almost everything the Russians say makes sense, and they're the truth tellers here. And our own government, the American government, is not telling the truth much of the time, and is making arguments that a rational person can't agree with. It's a really very uncomfortable situation to be in if you think about it.
100% agree. It is as bizarre. I mean, I like you. I grew up in the Cold War. I mean, I served on the front lines of the Cold War, patrolling against Soviet forces in right opposite what was Czechoslovakia and the DDR at the time. And to now see this seemingly reversed, it's hard for me to get my hand around.
Yeah, I mean, I find that I'm at odds with the United States, with what the United States is doing in just so many different situations. And I find it so easy to be critical of the United States. It's quite remarkable. And when I listen to Putin talk, I find it hard to disagree with anything he says from a Russian point of view. But I just wanted to point that out. I think, Danny, what's going on here is very simple. We understand now, and you can even see it in the newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times, that people understand the Russians are going to win. Nobody's sure what that victory is going to look like. It's going to be an ugly victory, but it's going to be a Russian victory. The Ukrainians are going to suffer a humiliating defeat, and NATO and the West and the United States are going to suffer a humiliating defeat. So the question you then have to ask yourself is, how will we respond to that situation? And we will double down. We will not accept defeat. We will look for ways to get back at the Russians and do everything we can to undo their ugly victory. And of course, the Ukrainians will do the same thing. Right? The Ukrainians are never going to accept this defeat, and they'll be looking ways to get back the territory that they've lost, including Crimea. And we, of course, will be in cahoots with them. And the question is, what happens then? And, you know, this is where Kaliningrad comes in. As I like to say, there's 6 different flashpoints that are in effect associated with Ukraine and the frozen conflict that's coming. 1 is the Arctic, 2 is the Baltic. There's a lot going on in the Baltic that's very nerve-wracking as well. 3 is Kaliningrad, 4 is Belarus, 5 is Moldova, and 6 is the Black Sea. You can imagine trouble, serious trouble starting in any one of those 6 places, you know, those 6 flashpoints. And given that we're not going to accept defeat, and we're going to begin to continue to poke at the Russians and look for opportunities to take advantage of them, which of course means they're going to do the same with us. I want to understand that. They're not going to sit idly by. The potential for trouble in Europe for the foreseeable future is very great. It's a really depressing situation if you think about it.
And so let me just ask you in the last few minutes that we have here, what would make sense? What if President Trump woke up tomorrow morning and says, you know what, this is dumb. I'm not going to listen to Mark Rutte. I'm not going to listen to Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer. All they want to do is just make trouble for Russia. I'd rather make business with Russia. So I'm going to do something different. I'm going to call John Mearsheimer and ask him what I should do next. What would you say?
I'm not sure there's very much you can do at this point. I mean, I think Trump could do a 180-degree turn, and he could accept the Russians' main demands, and he and Putin could work out some sort of deal. The problem is it would be almost impossible to convince the Ukrainians to accept the deal. It would be almost impossible to convince the Europeans to accept the deal. And as we know from listening to Senator Kennedy and Newt Gingrich and other Americans who represent the mainstream, getting the foreign policy establishment in the United States to go along with that deal that Trump works out with Putin would be extremely difficult. So even if Trump does a 180, which, you know, points in the direction of the optimal solution for shutting this war down, he may get out of the batter's box, he may get to first base, but getting around to home plate, I think, is almost impossible. So I think this is one of those cases where there just is no solution at this point.
But it wouldn't. I guess the least bad one would seem then to be this deal, whatever you're talking about, between Putin and Trump could be worked out, and then Trump just says, "Yeah, Ukraine, you're a sovereign country. Do whatever you want. You're just not going to do it with any bullets or bombs from us." Ukraine, Europe, same situation. And folks here, pound sand. He seems sometimes to be willing to tell his own supporters to pound sand when it's something that he feels strongly about. So it seems like maybe he could get up to second base by just because he does have the power of the presidency. That would seem to be less bad than doing nothing and just letting things take their own course. Do you think so?
Well, this is the argument, correct me if I'm wrong, where you basically say, we've worked out a deal. We're pretending we're Trump here. We've worked out a deal, Vladimir Putin and I, and it'll shut the conflict down if everybody accepts it. And you've made it clear, Ukraine and Europe, that you don't accept it. That's fine, but we're out of here. You're on your own now. And then you trust that the situation on the battlefield is such that the Ukrainians and the Europeans have no choice but to accept the deal with the Russians.
That's right. That's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, that's what you're suggesting. It's a possibility.
Is that less bad than what we are having right now?
I think that's probably a step in the right direction. It's just the problem, Danny, is it's so hard for me to imagine Trump doing that.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't answer your question. I think your question, I think your instincts are right. It would be better. You'd get to second base, maybe third base. But just on Trump, the problem that Trump faces is that he didn't shut this down immediately. What he had to do was act decisively and use that honeymoon period that he had for, you know, a month or two or three to basically coerce the Europeans and even the Ukrainians to play real hardball with them and play the peacemaker. But he didn't do that. And
right.
The problem is he's waffled. He's just been all over the place. And for him to do a 180-degree turn now, it's just hard for me to see how he can do this.
Couldn't agree with you more.
And just take Keith Kellogg. You know, in the beginning, it looked like he was going to sideline Keith Kellogg, which I think was smart because Keith Kellogg represented the foreign policy establishment. But Kellogg has come back from the dead, right? And Kellogg is now a player. And there are lots of people in his administration who identify with Kellogg's views. And the fact is, who in the administration agrees with Trump? I mean, who shares Trump's views on Ukraine? I think there's one person, and that's J.D. Vance. And he's not out front on this issue. So it's Trump all alone. He just doesn't have any allies. It's not like the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Armed Services Committee is in complete agreement with Trump, and they want to work with Trump. There's nobody who wants to work with Trump, right? They're all opposed. They all want to continue this war forever. And that's where we are. And of course, the Europeans and the Ukrainians think the same way. So in a funny way, Trump is the outlier. But because he was incompetent, and let's face it, he was incompetent and he played his hands so poorly, he's not in a position now where he can overcome all those forces that are arrayed against him.
So last question here. August 9th is coming up. That's the end of this 10-day where Trump is going to at least attempt to do something. he's going to put some more sanctions on Russia. Maybe the secondary part against China, Brazil, India, maybe that doesn't happen, but he'll certainly do some more on Russia. Who cares? But that's what's going to happen. But that's basically going to seal in this path to a frozen conflict that you're talking about here. What is your biggest concern if that happens on August 9th?
Well, I think your description of what will happen is the likely outcome. I find it hard to believe, as I said before, that he would put 500% tariffs on India and China. He's already demonstrated that he can't really play hardball with China because they can play hardball with us. And the idea that he's going to play hardball with India even more than he's done already, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think, he may slap a few more tariffs on Russia, but they're not going to be meaningful. Almost everybody agrees on that point. We don't have any more weapons to give. But what's happening here, and I think this is what you're getting at, is we're just committing ourselves to conflict with Russia forever and ever. Trump is in effect not making a gesture, a diplomatic gesture to try and work out some sort of modus vivendi between Moscow and Washington. He's doing the opposite, in fact. And I think given all that's happened since January 20th in terms of relations between Moscow and Washington, this will just make a bad situation worse. And once we get that frozen conflict, we will have poisonous relations between us and Russia for as far as the eye can see. And there'll be that ever-present danger, which we were talking about, of those potential flashpoints turning into conflicts. And by the way, again, you want to remember, we are deeply mired in the Middle East, right? We've got a forever war now with Iran, which is going to continue to do nuclear enrichment. The genocide in Gaza goes on. The Israelis, who were joined at the hip with, are fighting wars in southern Lebanon and southern Syria. And then there's East Asia, right? And the potential for something to go wrong out there is real. And you just really wonder where this is all headed.
Nowhere good.
Nowhere good.
But hey, we all we can do is keep pointing, shining a light on it, giving policy options, no matter how hard they are, they do exist, and things that could benefit both our country and the world at large if only we had leaders with the courage and the vision to get there. So you have illuminated that, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Danny.
And we appreciate you guys too. Also, just a quick reminder, we are on podcast now. Be sure and tell your friends. Some of them I know prefer to get their information via podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, anywhere you see your podcast, just type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive and they'll find us there. And then also we're expanding out into Substack, which John Mearsheimer also does. We're kind of getting into that world because a lot of people prefer their information via the written format. So there's Daniel Davis Deep Dive, all one word, .substack.com, and you'll find that there too. Be sure to share that with your friends because I know a lot of them probably would like to see it. Thank you very much, and we will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.